What if I told you that the oldest pyramid on the planet isn't in Egypt, isn't in Mexico, isn't in the jungles of Cambodia, but buried under 2 kilometers of ice on a continent where ordinary people are forbidden to fly? In 1974, a United States Air Force pilot took his aircraft over a classified sector of East Antarctica. He took 12 photographs. 7 days later, he was grounded permanently. His name was scrubbed from the flight logs, and the film was placed in the Pentagon's Black Archive, where it remained for nearly half a century, until 2023. And when one of those frames finally leaked to the internet, the world saw something it was never meant to see. Because it's an object more than 150 meters tall, taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza, with perfectly flat faces, made of black stone, and it's jutting out of the ice, in a place where, according to official human history, no one has set foot for 20 million years. But this is only the beginning, because if you watch this video to the end, you'll learn why 53 countries signed an agreement prohibiting the exploration of certain zones in Antarctica, why Google Earth blurs parts of its satellite imagery, and why every person who has tried to tell the truth about what lies beneath the ice has either gone silent or disappeared. Get comfortable. What you are about to hear, official science will deny to the very end. But the facts, the documents, and the testimonies speak for themselves. Antarctica is the last true mystery on our planet, a continent of 14 million square kilometers, 1.5 times the size of Europe, and at the same time, the only place on Earth with no indigenous population, no countries, no cities, no roads, only ice, wind, and a treaty from 1959 that formally designates this continent as a scientific zone, but in practice forbids any independent research without the approval of the participating governments. Just think about it. In the 21st century, when we've mapped the far side of the moon at meter-level resolution, there exists on our own planet a place about which we know less than we know about the surface of Mars. Today, we are going to descend into that mystery. We will examine 6 anomalies, 6 places that should not exist, 6 riddles, each of which taken separately might seem like a coincidence, but together they form a picture that leaves the world's best geologists, archaeologists, and historians without coherent answers. We will talk about the pilot who saw more than he was supposed to, about a lake 15 million years old, harboring the DNA of creatures that shouldn't exist, about a gravitational anomaly the size of half of France, about a Turkish map from the 16th century depicting Antarctica beneath its ice, about satellite images that vanish from the internet days after they are published, and about a witness who managed to say just one single sentence before his heart stopped. What you are about to see may change the way you think about human history, and we will begin with that photograph, the image that destroyed a pilot's career and stayed locked in an archive for 50 years. Picture this for a moment. January 1974. The Cold War is at its height. The United States and the Soviet Union are running a silent race, not only in space, but at the poles. Military aircraft from both superpowers regularly cross the skies of Antarctica, conducting scientific missions that the public will only hear about decades later. On this day, the temperature outside the aircraft is minus 62 degrees. Captain Brian Marshall, this is a pseudonym, his real name is still classified, is flying a C-130 Hercules reconnaissance aircraft over Queen Maud Land. This is one of the most remote places on the planet. The nearest settlement is 1,800 kilometers away. The nearest doctor is even further. Marshall is an experienced pilot. Korea and Vietnam are behind him, He has logged over 8,000 flight hours. He is not the kind of man who mistakes a mirage for reality. The sky that day is clear. Visibility is exceptional. That rarely happens over Antarctica. The continent is usually blanketed by dense cloud systems. But on that day, everything came together. And then, on the horizon, Marshall sees it. A black triangle jutting out of the white desert. At first, he thinks it's an ordinary mountain. Here they are called nunataks, rocky peaks that pierce through the ice. There are thousands of them in Antarctica, nothing unusual. But the closer he flies, the stronger the feeling grows that something is wrong. Because this mountain has 4 faces, perfectly symmetrical, with an angle of inclination of about 52 degrees, almost exactly like the Great Pyramid of Cheops. The apex, sharp, not eroded by wind. The base, an even square. Marshall contacts base, requests permission to make another pass. It's granted. He takes 12 photographs. He returns to base. He hands the film in to the intelligence department, and he goes to dinner, thinking he has just taken the best pictures of his career. 7 days later, he is called into the commander's office. He is told he is being reassigned to desk duty in Nevada. No explanation, no possibility of appeal. His flying career is over. But here's where it gets strange. In 2023, an image appears on the dark web, a single frame from that very series. Metadata analysis confirms it. Kodak Aerochrome film, the format used by the U.S. Air Force in the 1970s. Geographic coordinates encoded in the file point to a location in the Gamburtsev Mountains, a subglacial range discovered by a Soviet expedition in 1958. The image spreads through the internet instantly. Digital forensic specialists analyze it from every angle, searching for signs of forgery. They find none. The photograph is authentic. And here's where nothing adds up, because the Gamburtsev Mountains are themselves an anomaly. In size, they are comparable to the Alps, but they are completely buried beneath the ice. And geologists still cannot explain how they formed. There is no tectonic activity there, no subduction of lithospheric plates. There should be no mountains like that. They are called the ghost mountains. They exist in defiance of every known law of geology. Conspiracy theorists say it plainly. These are the remnants of a civilization that existed before the last ice age. That Antarctica was once warm. And this, by the way, is a scientific fact that we'll come back to. That people could have lived there, or something else. And that Marshall's Pyramid is not the only one. There are at least 3. All 3 form a perfect triangle, exactly like the Giza complex in Egypt. Scientists respond more calmly. This is called a pyramidal peak, a geological formation that occurs under certain types of glacial erosion. Such peaks exist in the Alps. The Matterhorn in Switzerland is a classic example. But the Matterhorn doesn't stand in the middle of an icy desert. The Matterhorn wasn't photographed by a pilot who was then forbidden from flying. And most importantly, the Matterhorn has 4 faces, but they are not symmetrical. They are the result of chaotic erosion from different directions. Marshall's photograph shows symmetry, mathematical symmetry, the kind nature does not create by accident. And here comes a question impossible to wave away. If this is just a random mountain, why was the pilot grounded? Why was the film classified? Why were 11 of the 12 frames never published? Hold on to that question. We'll come back to it. Let's go deeper, literally down. In the center of East Antarctica, beneath 4 kilometers of ice, lies a lake. It is called Lake Vostok, named for the Soviet Antarctic station located directly above it. In size, it is comparable to Lake Ontario in North America. Its depth reaches 900 meters, and it has been completely isolated from the surface of the planet for at least 15 million years. Picture this for a moment. Water that has not been touched by sunlight since saber-toothed cats roamed the Earth. Air that no modern human has ever breathed. An ecosystem that has evolved in absolute darkness, under pressure of thousands of atmospheres, in total isolation from the rest of the world. The Vostok Station was established in 1957. This is the coldest place on the planet. The minimum recorded surface temperature on Earth was registered here, -89 degrees Celsius. In the 1970s, Soviet scientists began drilling, just to see what was down there, deep in the ice. The project continued for decades, and the closer they got to the water, the stranger the events around the station became. In 1998, when only 120 meters remained to the surface of the lake, the drilling was abruptly halted. The official reason: concerns from the international community that contact with the pristine relict water would contaminate the unique ecosystem. But here's an interesting detail. That same year, a strange incident occurred at Vostok Station. One of the expedition members, engineer Alexei Kurakin, died under unclear circumstances. The official diagnosis: a heart attack. He was 43 years old. He had no prior health issues. In 2012, Russian scientists finally drilled through the last meters of ice and reached the surface of the lake. What they found is still debated in the scientific community. DNA was discovered in the water samples, but not just from microorganisms. There were traces of bacteria that in nature live in only one place: in the stomachs of fish. That means there must be a complex ecosystem in the lake. Fish, predators, prey. A full food chain existing in absolute darkness for 15 million years. And here's where it becomes truly strange. Just before contact with the water, the drill unexpectedly jammed. The Russian base recorded inexplicable magnetic anomalies directly beneath the drilling point. Compasses showed every direction at once. Electronic equipment failed. Radio communications with the mainland were interrupted for 40 minutes. The official reason: a storm. But the meteorological data from that week, published later, shows a clear sky. One of the expedition participants, Nikolai Vasilyev, later gave interviews and chose his words very carefully. He said, "We encountered something that science is not yet prepared to explain." He did not elaborate further. A popular theory that spread across the internet: there is something in Lake Vostok, some massive metallic object generating a magnetic field. Possibly ancient technology. Possibly the very thing Nazi Germany sent a secret expedition to this very sector to find in 1938 and 1939, long before humanity knew that the lake existed. And this is not a conspiracy theory. The new Swabia expedition really happened. It was personally authorized by Hermann Göring. German Dornier Wall seaplanes conducted hundreds of reconnaissance flights over Antarctica. They dropped several thousand metal flags, darts bearing the Nazi symbol, marking the territory the Third Reich claimed as its own. Why? What were they looking for in a region that, even today, is one of the most hostile natural zones on the planet? The scientific explanation for Lake Vostok's magnetic anomalies is more modest. Perhaps beneath the lake lies a massive deposit of iron ore. Perhaps it's the influence of the South Magnetic Pole, which behaves unpredictably right in the region of East Antarctica. But then why, after 2012, was further drilling effectively halted? Why were complete water samples never published in major international scientific journals? And why has Russia not returned to full-scale research, despite this being the most ambitious scientific achievement of the decade? Sometimes silence speaks louder than any words. Perfectly circular. This means that in this location, beneath the ice, lies an object of colossal mass, something distorting the Earth's gravitational field itself. Scientists proposed an explanation. It is a crater, the impact site of a gigantic meteorite that may have caused the Permian mass extinction 250 million years ago, the catastrophe that wiped out 96% of all living creatures on the planet. If true, the Wilkes Land crater is the largest impact crater in Earth's history, twice the size of the Chicxulub crater, which is believed to have killed the dinosaurs. But here's the problem. There are several details that don't add up. First, the shape. Natural impact craters are rarely perfectly circular on this scale. They are deformed by tectonic activity, erosion, and shifting strata. The Wilkes crater is a nearly mathematically perfect circle. Second, the age. The official dating is 250 million years. But some geologists point to signs that the object is much younger, possibly hundreds of times younger. And third, the history of this place. In the same region, in 1947, part of Admiral Richard Byrd's expedition vanished. Operation High Jump. It was the largest military expedition in the history of Antarctica. 4,700 servicemen, 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, 23 aircraft, and a mission cut short after 8 weeks instead of the 6 months originally planned. Why? When Byrd returned to the United States, he gave an interview to the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio. In it, he uttered a phrase they would spend decades trying to bury. He said that in the event of a new war, the United States would face an enemy capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Byrd was one of the most respected explorers of his time. He was the first to fly over the North Pole, the first over the South. He was no fantasist. He was not given to exaggeration, and he chose his words with great care. So what enemy was he talking about? In 1947, Soviet aviation did not yet have the technology for polar flights. Intercontinental ballistic missiles only appeared in the late 1950s. Jet aircraft were in their infancy. Conspiracy theorists interpret Byrd's words unambiguously. There is something beneath the Antarctic ice. A base, craft, technologies that humanity should not possess. Historians counter. Byrd was misunderstood. His words were taken out of context. He was referring to hypothetical weapons of the future, not to anything actually in existence. But there is one detail that doesn't fit the official version. Admiral Byrd's personal diary, published after his death in 1957, contains entries that his own family tried to have removed from publication. In these entries, Byrd describes a flight over Antarctica during which he saw an oasis, a warm, green valley amid the ice, and a meeting with beings who called themselves the Elder Ones. The authenticity of this diary is still disputed. Byrd himself never publicly confirmed its contents. But his cryptic phrases in the El Mercurio interview are documented. Their existence is an undisputed fact. And no one has ever adequately explained why a military expedition of that scale was cut short. Why Byrd's reports are still partially classified to this day. And why the Wilkes Land gravitational anomaly is perfectly circular, atypical for natural structures, and located in the very sector where Byrd lost contact with part of his fleet. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, as we said before, have a way of accumulating. January 1974, a U.S. Air Force military transport plane crosses Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. On board is a pilot we'll call, for the sake of this story, Brian Marshall. The mission is routine, ice cover reconnaissance. 3 hours into the flight, Marshall notices something on the ice that should not be there. A dark, triangular object, perfectly symmetrical. By his estimate, as tall as a 40-story building. He manages to take 12 photographs. After landing, the film is taken from him. Marshall is called to a debriefing, after which he signs a non-disclosure agreement and never again speaks of what he saw. In 2023, one of those photographs allegedly leaked online. We'll come back to what's on it. But first, the bigger question. What is the most mysterious continent on the planet actually hiding? Antarctica is 14 million square kilometers, the combined area of the United States and Mexico. 98% of its surface is covered by ice, with an average thickness of nearly 2 kilometers. Beneath that ice lies an entire hidden world. Mountain ranges higher than the Alps, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, more than 400 subglacial lakes, and, pay attention to this, all of it is mapped worse than the surface of Mars. That is not an exaggeration. We have detailed maps of Mars with resolution measured in meters. The subglacial relief of Antarctica is known only approximately, from radar soundings that give us nothing more than rough outlines. The largest continent we know the least about. Strange, isn't it? In 1996, Russian and British scientists confirmed the existence of a colossal body of water beneath the ice. Lake Vostok, the size of Lake Ontario, beneath 4 kilometers of ice. In total darkness, isolation, and crushing pressure for 20 million years. When Soviet scientists began drilling, the project stretched across decades. In 2012, the drill finally reached the surface of the water. The samples extracted contained traces of microorganisms that could not be definitively classified as any known terrestrial species. And then something strange happened. Further drilling was halted. The official reason: risk of contaminating a unique ecosystem. A reasonable explanation. But it was followed by a series of other events not so easily explained. Several leading researchers on the project passed away in the years that followed, some from illness, some in accidents. A coincidence? Most likely, yes. Polar researchers tend to be older. The work is extreme. But combined with everything else, it's just one more detail that adds to an uncomfortable picture. In 2006, satellites from NASA's GRACE program detected an enormous gravitational anomaly in the region of Wilkes Land, beneath 4 kilometers of ice, a massive circular structure roughly 500 kilometers in diameter. The official explanation: a crater from an asteroid impact about 250 million years ago. Possibly the very asteroid that triggered the Permian extinction, the largest extinction event in Earth's history, when 96% of marine species disappeared. It's a perfectly plausible hypothesis. But a hypothesis is all it remains. No one has ever drilled into that structure.